and welcome to today's segment of The Power of Money with your host, Michelle Graves, affectionately known for the last 30 years as the Money Lady, both locally, nationally, and internationally. And for those of you who are my longtime viewers, you know that my commitment remains to empower my viewers with information, with resources, and with fantastic guests who can change their world by giving them the information that they need to enable them and their families to grow and to thrive in such challenging times. Today's show is no exception. It's a continuation of our series on domestic violence. Don't hang up or press the button for your television. This is important information for you. Why? Because domestic violence over the last 40 years has not declined. In fact, given all the social media and online dating and being involved with people you know nothing about because their families are in a different part of the country, people are finding themselves in unbelievably toxic and disruptive and even brutal situations as it pertains to domestic violence. It impacts the community. It impacts our society. And for many of us, it will impact you. Okay, so I'm continuing. Today's show is going to focus on the culture of domestic violence and why it has found such a home in the United States of America. Now, don't get me wrong. All over the world, people are experiencing domestic violence. But in the United States, because of the culture that we live in, which endorses certain types of behavior in the family, outside the family, then it tends to be more of a problem. This is my opinion. But I did bring an expert on, Jane Keiffer, who has been in this field for 40 years. 40 years. And she's executive director of the Artemis Center, which is a domestic violence resource center agency in Dayton, Ohio. She has ground up experience from all of her years of working in this field. So it would be only logical and natural for me to invite her in. So on our last show, and if you didn't see it, just go back, go to YouTube, you'll see it, to make you aware of what we're looking at today and her experience personally. I wanted to know how she personally felt about these things. It was a great show, give you some good information. Now this show, we're gonna deal with the data, the characteristics, and what you need to be aware of. That domestic violence affects the elderly, it affects Muslims, it affects teenagers, it affects your regular normal mom and pops, it affects all kinds of people right now, today. And you need to know the signs, what happens, and if you are currently involved in that situation yourself, as a viewer, that there is a helpline that you can call to get help and resources to help you out of this matter. But for today's show, we're now going to focus on the culture of domestic violence. Why has it found such a foothold in our country where it's okay to behave like this and to just do your thing? Well, not good. So I'm going to get on into the body of this show. Stay tuned, sit down, take notes. And most importantly, if you've never had to experience domestic violence, God bless you. I'm serious. I'm a victim. In my younger years, I was a victim. Changed my life. Changed my life, viewers. My face has a plate in it. Yeah, I'm telling it openly, so that you can know that a woman of my accomplishments, that when it comes to something like that, it can happen to you too. So, Jane Keiffer, how you going? How you doing?
I'm good. Good to see you.
Same. I think about, we did an interview 8 years ago.
8 years ago.
Can you believe that? That's amazing. It's so good. But where do we want to begin? Let's talk about...
Can we begin by me saying thank you for sharing your story? Because I think part of domestic violence is it's such a secret and it's hard to talk about it. And the fact that you just shared that openly is such a huge need, so other people know that they're not alone. So thank you.
You're quite welcome. It has so defined my life because at the young age of 22, I'm from Kentucky, and I was doing my graduate work in Washington, D.C., working on my PhD in economics and finance. Didn't have any relatives in Washington, D.C. I had a few friends, but I was mainly a geek doing academics, and had an absolutely life-changing experience, changed my life. I had to discontinue my PhD. I had to flee with my child, and literally penniless, homeless, and start all over from scratch. And as I tell everybody, domestic violence is always going to be with me because of my situation with my face and what they had to do to save my life. And I am not kind about that, Jane. I'm not. And he's gone. God judge him. Done. But my point is for women today, ladies, you got to fight. You got to hold your mind intact. You got to think about yourself, and you got to do what you got to do. And back then, we didn't have any kind of support. The police told me you need to get a handle on your husband. I mean, how are you going to get a handle on a man with a machete? Right. I mean, but I tell women, fight. Don't ever lose hope. You can and you will get through this. And this program is about empowering and educating anyone who has been the victim of that type of treatment. There is hope. And today, thank God, there are people like you who know how it works. And so let us begin. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Okay. So where do we want to start? Let's talk about the culture.
Let's talk about it.
Okay, I'm listening.
Well, I think that domestic violence, you said earlier, like it's so prevalent.
Yeah.
And I think if we're going to go there, let's go there, right?
Let's go there.
So it's rooted in the belief of misogyny and men's rights and how, I mean, if we really want to go big picture real quick, like if we look at our country over the years, look at our Congress, look at our policing, look at our court systems, have always been male dominated.
Yes.
And so it is a huge shift. I mean, we've been shifting a little bit, right?
Trying to get right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But my point is, I'm never going to not see domestic violence in our culture because it's such an ingrained belief, for so many people, and that they feel entitled to treat others the way that they treat them.
Yeah, they do.
Yep.
They do. And that is sad. But I tell you, I feel that the work that you're doing, the work that people are doing all over this country, is forcing a reassessment of the definition of a family, what it looks like, the definition of what is acceptable within the family. Is it acceptable for daddy to beat up mommy?
Right.
Is that acceptable? And if it's not, then what are we challenged to do differently?
Right. Well, I think, when you talked about helping somebody back in the 70s, there weren't even domestic violence shelters back then.
Not at all.
So where were you going to go, right? So it was the kindness of individuals that opened their homes. And so now, I mean, we've progressed in this country, but survivors still have to leave their homes to get safe, right? They're the ones that have to flee to shelter. And I think what's happening as we are entering 2024 is that we are talking about it more, that we're having a better understanding. Because again, for so long, it was such a secret.
Yes.
And it's a secret for many reasons. It's embarrassing. It's overwhelming. People not even aware of their options.
Right.
And so I think we as a society are doing better at talking about it and helping stand up and saying this isn't okay.
Right. And it's not.
And it's not. It's not. But we got a long way to go.
Yeah, we do.
We do.
We do.
But I think the Me Too movement made an impact.
I think so.
And really women finding their voice.
Right. And I would have to say, when we look at the pie chart, and for those of you that really want to learn about her agency, they've got a phenomenal website, about domestic violence with with a little circle that deals with what it is, what it looks like, easy to maneuver. But it's what's the address of the website?
It's www.artemiscenter.org.
Please do that. Just do it, because it is that thorough, comprehensive, and frankly, eye-opening when you realize the statistics on the number of people that are impacted from this horrible, savage issue. And on your last show, you talked about the court responds, and better than my day, because we didn't even have a court to go to. And the community response was, well, you need to kind of work it out. Well, how are you going to work it out when you are the victim? What is there to work out?
Right. Because it's a power imbalance, right? I mean, so there's no way to work it out with somebody who has more power in the relationship than yourself.
Right. Like I share with women, at the point you run to the police department, I'll never forget this as long as I live, ran to the district police department with him chasing me with a machete.
Oh my gosh.
And I go in and I'm like skinny and tiny and oh my God, and they tell me you need to get a hold of him and let him know he cannot bring that in here.
Oh.
You need to go out there and you need to talk to him because we cannot have that in here. And eye-opening moment. And so I tell women, I'm transparent because it can happen to any female, regardless of your economic class, regardless of your titles, your family relations. Cray-cray is cray-cray, okay? And I do believe they're crazy. I believe there's mental issues. I believe there's a lot going on. But back to what you were saying, the numbers are increasing, decreasing, or?
I think the numbers are increasing, but I think it's tied to because we're talking about it more.
I think you're right.
I think we're having the conversations better. I will say we at Artemis experienced when COVID started and the stay-at-home order went in place, it got really quiet, which was scary because we knew things were happening. And inside. And then once the doors and things started opening, our phone calls very much increased. Like we saw a huge jump in calls.
Okay.
And I think because now they have places to go and resources to find.
Right.
And I also think that COVID really had people thinking about their lives. Mm-hmm. You know, we saw the Great Resignation and people really trying to figure out what's best. And I think survivors kind of took some stock in that as well and thought,
think you're right.
Is this what's going to happen? And then they really needed the support on how to navigate leaving or trying to make the relationship different.
And I think a lot of that, if I might be transparent, because women have been so programmed to failure. And I say this because up until the 70s, women couldn't even get credit cards. I mean, this is my time.
Right.
Women weren't allowed to own property without their husband's co-signature. Women could not, in many instances, be on bank accounts as the sole signator. The younger generation of women today don't have a point of reference because they weren't there.
Right.
But it did shape and mold the general societal response to women that wanted to be more assertive. And women like that were considered different, weird,
Yep.
and not really good marriage material. Yeah. I mean, I had people challenge me about my PhD work in economics. They were like, why don't you just go home and be a good wife? And you're like, why are they mutually exclusive?
Right.
But it was the framing of our culture that has created what we have today.
Sure.
I believe so. What are your thoughts?
Well, absolutely, I agree. And you also just like, I mean, if we break it down, men get paid more, right? Because they're supposed to take care of the family. So
Yes.
in that situation alone, they have more power, right?
Right,
And so
because they got financial power.
they have the financial power. So I think that the groundwork has been laid that men are going to be, quote unquote, superior to women. And then again, the belief system follows that. And it's hard if you've grown up, and again, we believe domestic violence is a learned behavior.
I do believe it's learned.
And if you grow up in that home and you witness that over and over again, it makes it hard to unlearn that. Like you really
Right.
need intervention, people holding you accountable, because how do you know what you don't know?
Right. And I think for many of them, because the gentleman I was married to at that time, I did not know anything about his family. You better look at their families. You better look at what mom's looking like and what dad is behaving like, and
And how they treat their mom.
and how they treat. Oh my gosh, yes. And these are things, of course, with so many people scattered today. Here we are again. You date a guy you met online, or Facebook, or Instagram, or whatever, but you meet him online, or the dating apps. You know nothing about him. You don't know his family background. I mean, where we came from, you knew everybody. If they were kind of cuckoo, you knew that too, how many people in the family were. And it made you a little more careful about engaging. And today, because people don't know the importance of that, they just date a guy and hope it works out. Hope there's that magnetism. Well, you may have it for a minute, but you may wind up with something else.
Well, and I think what we can talk about, what is help, I think technology is a cursing and a blessing, right?
Yes, it is.
But you certainly can go online and look up people's records and see. I mean, let's start there. You can go to public records in any county and look
And
at
look 'em up.
and look them up.
Yeah.
And if they have something on the background, because this is the other thing that happens. Let's say I'm dating some guy and I look him up and he's got a domestic violence. His response to me, what do you think is going to be? She was cray-cray. It was her fault. This big misunderstanding.
Yeah.
Right? So again, it's that not accountability, responsibility,
Right.
and they blame the other person.
Right.
So number one, look people up and check out their patterns, because that's going to tell you something. And we believe the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior.
Say that again, please. Can you look them in the audience?
The best predictor of future behavior is past behavior, especially when it comes to domestic violence, because again, it's a learned behavior. And so we really want to look at what their history looks like.
Let me translate this, ladies. What you see is what you get. Okay? You're not an exception to the rule. I'm sorry, that's your vanity talking. He's not going to treat you any different. He can't. His brain. Pum. And you need to handle your business. No, you're not his savior. No, you cannot take him into the promised land. No, you cannot take him into Jesus. No, you've got to deal with you. And you cannot ever put yourself on the dinner plate as the turkey dinner, hoping for a different outcome. I will go even further, and I'm just saying for my own stuff, whatever you can't find on internet, and you can find out a lot, but you can always take and tell them I'm going to vet you. You can ask them, do you have anything you want to tell me?
Right.
Tell me now. And if they lie, that's the end of it. End of it, line through the name, end of it. Why? Because you only have one life to live. And that's what I stress to women all the time. You only have one life to live. And you want to live it with vibrancy and with joy. You don't want to be treated badly, abused badly. That's not the story for a woman.
Right.
It just is not. Men play football, a few women, but men crash and bang and hit each other. And that's another whole story about that's legitimate violence too. They make a lot of money being violent. But for us, it does not work like that. And we have to be extremely careful to not get brutalized into relationships. The warning signs are warning signs. Mm-hmm. Have you observed that in your own counseling?
Yeah.
That there were warning signs?
Yes. I think what happens is, one, we're women, so we want to make relationships work.
Yes, we do.
Sometimes we mistake jealousy as love.
Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Right? And so so let's break it down a little bit, right? So I go to work and my partner says, why don't you call me when you get to work? And I'm like, that's very kind. Sure, I'll call you. But then over time, it's call me when you get to work, call me at lunch, call me before you leave. Mm-hmm. Now I'm taking you. So it's a gradual process, so it's hard to see. But at first, we're accepting of it because we think, oh, he loves me.
Yeah.
He wants me to be the center of his world. And that we kind of like that he's jealous, right? Because they're giving us attention. Mm-hmm. But then it continues to progress, and then that's when the red flags and the warning signs. Like we talked in the first session about early involvement. Like, oh, I'm going to move in with you, baby. I love you so much.
Yeah.
I'm going to put a ring on it.
2 weeks into it.
Yeah, 3 months in, I'm putting a ring on it.
Yeah.
We don't know enough about you.
I would say, based on what I know about trauma, through this master class I take every week with a profound man, Mr. Winburn, and childhood trauma, there's just too much I don't know.
Right.
And I am willing, because it's my life, to say no. I'm willing to say, we have to wait. We have to wait until all the magnetism that draws me to you. Yeah. And I'm not prepared to say it's not legitimate, but I don't put a lot of credence into sexual magnetism, which is, we just knew at first sight. What did you know at first sight?
Right.
Oh, I could feel it. What? Where were you feeling it? Like, where? Oh, you don't understand. No. Cool it, chill. And take the time to learn the other person.
And and that says something if they're okay with that. If they're like, absolutely, let's...
Right, a good man should be okay with you vetting him.
Right, and having a boundary.
And having boundaries, which is, if a person tells you my credit is bad, and he or she is in their 30s with bad credit, that's not good.
Right.
I mean, I'm just saying, as a finance person, I'm not comfortable with people that don't pay their bills, because that tells me something about your character. Mm-hmm. Tells the bank something about your character too.
Right.
Which is why they take your stuff when you don't pay. They should. But even deeper than that is observance of their social interactions and how they behave with you. Because I really feel that women give these critters too much grace. You don't give him grace when he's already red flagged you. Mm-hmm. You can't, because that's a danger zone.
But we as women are taught to do that.
I know we're taught because we watch other women. If you're in the church, especially, she's always got this frozen smile on her face and her hat. Or, they don't talk about it because that's personal. And you say, well, well, oh, no, we don't, that's family. Well, if family is killing you, then you need to rethink what that looks like and need to take steps to protect yourself. But we do know, based on the data I was looking at, that they will go as far as even trying to commit suicide and blame you for being the instigator of their suicide.
Right.
Now that, oh my God, that's outrageous.
Well, it's emotional abuse, right? Because I'm going to say to you, until I'm killing myself, I can't live without you.
I can't live without you.
And you love this person.
Yes.
Again, there's still love, and so you don't want them dead. So it's a way to get you back into the relationship. Nope, you're going to be okay. I'm going to help take care of you. But it's another tactic of domestic violence.
Right. And there's so many nuances. Like I tell women, why isn't he working? Why doesn't he have a job? Well, it's hard out here. Why doesn't he have a job? Okay. Why are you letting him drive your car while you're at work? Well, because he doesn't have a car, but he's not using it to get a job.
Right.
Why are we having these conversations? Because something is not clicking. But would you share with me just the information that we talked about around power and control? Mm-hmm. Can you talk about that?
Sure. So we believe in domestic violence is all about power and control. One person having more power and control over another, and it's done by different components. And sometimes I think people get confused, like, oh, who hit who first? That's not what it's about. Doesn't matter. It really is power and control. Now, some domestic violence relationships don't get physical, right? Stays at that emotional, mental abuse.
Mm-hmm. Can you be more specific about that in terms of the emotional, mental? You talked about how he wants you to call.
Right.
That's one type of mental.
Mental
Is that
abuse.
mental
Yep.
abuse? Okay, what is another type?
The putting you down, calling you crazy, making you feel less than, telling you you're fat, you're stupid, you're ugly, you're a bitch, no one's gonna love you, like, right? And so we as women, when you hear that over and over again,
my God.
what happens? We believe it.
Yeah, and then you see her get bigger and bigger and bigger, and because she is now in a spin.
Right, and we're also like, am I?
Am I?
And so we question that. Mm-hmm. And so it makes it really hard, again, because what's happening is the batter is having us focus on them, and we lose sight of ourselves. And we're doing everything we can to make sure that everything's okay when they get home. It's exhausting.
It would have to be exhausting. And then the mental stress of what's he gonna do next?
What's going to trip him up next?
What am I walking on eggs?
Yep.
I hear that from a lot of people. I felt like I was walking on eggs. You should not feel like you're walking on eggs.
Right.
With your spouse or significant other.
Right.
Something is not right.
Right.
That's a flag.
Right, because it's healthy to argue, right? I mean, relationships
people have disagreements.
And the other example we talk about, and which is right up your alley, Michelle, is that there's also the financial abuse, right?
Okay.
And so some people really don't care about balancing a checkbook. Now I'm old saying checkbook, but like balancing the finances. But when it's an abuse, there's no conversation, and the batter is controlling the money. So many survivors say to us, my money is his money, and his money is his money.
That is so true.
So true.
I've heard that a lot. How does your money get to be his money, and his money is his money?
Yep.
How does that happen? And how do you manage life like that? I mean, who pays the bills?
Right.
And I find a lot of times it's that batterer that pays the bills, or doesn't pay the bills.
Or doesn't pay the bills.
Or doesn't.
Yep.
Because that money is a source of control.
Very much so. We know over 90% of domestic violence situations involve financial abuse.
And so she's stuck.
She's stuck. Right.
That is really, really difficult to swallow.
It is. And it's difficult because it also, most batters are saying, put your money with ours, the interest rate will grow quicker, whatever,
God.
whatever that is. And again, we love this person. They're not abusive 24/7. We want to believe them. So we do it. And now we're really in a difficult spot.
Yeah, because you have no money.
No money.
Period. And you're in America, a female, maybe with children, and no money.
And when we talk about domestic violence being about power and control, in our first segment, we talked about like the law of domestic violence. I can't call the police on my abuser and saying they're not sharing the money with me. That's not against the law.
It is
'cause we're
not.
married.
It's a choice.
It's a choice.
Yeah.
And so that makes it really even more difficult that now I can't even get outside support through law enforcement by this type of abuse.
Right. And you cannot, in most cases, go to if you are involved with a community or a church, you're not going to get support from those venues. They're not going to touch it. Why? Because truthfully, a lot of their congregants are in that same situation, and that gets really muddy. They don't want to do it. So how do you deal with your resources? What do they typically do, Jane?
Well, it really depends. Like, we really have to talk with the individual. And again, I think we talked about this in the first segment. Do they have family that we can help them get back to?
Yeah. I love that when you said you'd buy tickets,
right?
Put them on a bus with the kids, and off they go.
Off they go. Sometimes we talk about, are you able just to put a few dollars back? Like, and I know it doesn't feel like much, but just enough to save something back without them knowing. Sometimes you can't, right?
Right,
Sometimes you
because
can't.
they're very controlling.
They're very much looking, because the other thing, just a lot of people don't know the taxes. Like the batter files the tax. They don't even know how much their abuser makes.
Right,
So
they don't.
They don't. So when it comes time for divorce, they're like, I don't even know his income.
Right.
Which makes it so difficult. It makes it scary. Like, are you really going to leave when you have no money?
Right. Right. So that's why I don't judge because the money is a big one.
So big.
And if you have children, especially, you don't have financial resources, you do not have food, you may not have shelter, you may not even have a car.
Right.
He may have the car.
Right.
And that level of bondage can be incredibly painful, not just the physical pain, but just the mental pain of knowing that you are in jail.
It's terrifying.
That's terrifying. And because of that, that's why I'm having this conversation with you. I know we talk about male, female, but let's go deeper. How are they able to sustain this over the years? So you see so many seniors, because as we age, there are more and more people that have lived with this over their lives. And I'll just say this as an experience I had many years ago. It's a very prominent couple in Cincinnati, and he became ill. And he was abusive. I didn't connect the dots because it just didn't fit what I thought. But he was, when I went into their home, not on the outside, but on the inside, that was a completely different dynamic. She was so mouse-like. And he was in the bed, he couldn't move. Get this, do that. And she would scurrying around. And I told her, I said, you don't have to do that. Oh, yes, I do. You don't understand. She was still living as if he were well and able.
Yeah.
So mentally, she was still there.
Yes.
And I thought about that later in life, like, oh, I missed the signs. I didn't even realize how mentally tied up she was. She could have left him to die. There was nothing he could do. He was immobile. But it was the whole psychological.
Right. It's ingrained, like that, her belief system, and that she's responsible for this person to care for them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
And again, as women, we're told to be the caretakers. I mean, that's the other thing that gets reinforced for us over and over and over again. So it is her responsibility to care for him, especially now that he's ill.
Yeah. Well, that was something. I was watching a television show where they talked about the autoimmune system and how many women were statistically, our numbers are so much greater than males. The fact that we carry so much stress in trying to make another person happy, accommodating, a privilege. That privilege that comes, and I know I'm not bashing men, I don't want you listeners to misunderstand, but I deal with data. I don't get into personal. I deal with data. And if the data says a certain thing, then I'm going to look closer. And it just seems to me, as we look at all these different things that are happening today in our country, and this uptick in violence, do you have any solutions? Because this show airs all over the country now.
I think when we talk, one of the most important things to do is a phrase is when you see something, say something. And again, as a survivor, I may not be able to talk or speak up for myself, but if you hear your neighbor, or if you see something, I think that it's important that you reach out to the police or reach out to the individual and say, are you okay? Most survivors are going to say, yeah, I'm okay.
Wow. So when the police come, they say, I'm okay.
It was a misunderstanding, I'm okay.
Misunderstanding. But her face is...
Right. Because again, there's the fear factor. Just like the woman you're talking about, the elderly woman.
Yes.
Like it's fear. It's all rooted in fear. And if I don't do
what he says,
then I'm going to be in bigger trouble. And trouble looks different for so many people.
You're correct. That's a very, very good observation. Although when you're dealing with an infirm husband who's been a jerk his entire life, and you don't give him the level of care, then what's the outcome?
Right.
I mean, is there an outcome?
But there's the fear, but there's also the, see, you never loved me like I told you. Like there's that guilt that also plays into it.
Okay.
Because again, it's always her fault. And so that's not going to change. His belief system isn't going to change. Now, what I will say is I've heard of women who've been abused and then their partners become infirmed and they do become a little bit more violent. They do not take care of them. They might, they'll fight back because now the playing field has been leveled a bit.
But he still is unaware. He doesn't get it.
Right. No, because their belief system hasn't changed.
Right. So where do we go with this? Because we're looking at children who are the product of this type of a relationship, and they are observers.
Yes.
And many times they become the very thing that they hate.
Yeah.
They become abusers.
Well, we have to get into our school systems.
Okay.
And we were doing some trainings in the middle school and high school, and I got to be honest, too late.
Oh,
it's too
wow.
late. The stories that we hear from our teens and our students in middle school, they're experiencing violence just as much as adults.
The teenagers are.
Teenagers are.
Female, male, doesn't
Females.
matter?
No, in the teens, you see more males coming forward. We had a male come forward and actually shared that he was scared to break up with his girlfriend because every time he tried to break up with her, she threatened suicide.
Oh, no.
So, yeah, I mean, it's affecting our kids.
Yes.
So we got to get into younger kids and to really help talk about healthy relationships. Again, jealousy doesn't equal love. Putting hands on is not the way to answer, but really what does healthy relationships look like and help them understand.
I had never even thought about that example you just gave of the young man that couldn't break off with his girlfriend because of her threats of suicide. And the thing is that she might have done it.
She might have done it.
I mean, that's where we are today.
And he's walking around with this fear.
Yes.
And, and now we're supposed to try to learn, and he didn't know where to go. And so we just happened to be in the school, and he was able to share.
So how did he resolve that, or were his parents involved? Or
we went into the school and did a program, and so we connected him with the school counselor because that's
Okay.
And then hopefully they did their thing, but yeah.
Well, let's flip the script for a minute.
Sure.
Because I read a profound book about men that are involved with wives who are abusers.
Sure.
And that book opened up my eyes to a whole nother dimension of relationships where a man can't leave her, but she's abusive. And physically abusive.
Yes. Oh, yeah. It absolutely happens. I mean, we've been talking he a lot in this program, and I really want to be clear that men can be victims of domestic
I
violence.
know they can be, yes.
Now, I also think it's really important that national statistics, the CDC, the Department of Justice, all say that 85 to 95% of victims are women.
Okay, that's
right?
the fact.
That's the fact.
Okay, then if 85 to 95%, the 5% that are not are men that are getting abused by their wives.
Yeah, and I'll even say, I was just talking the other day, let's say it is the 15%. Out of that 15%, I would say 5% are heterosexual men and the 10% are gay men.
My words.
I would,
A gay man abusing another gay man.
Yes.
Or same thing with the females.
Yep. Yes.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
What?
So yeah, I mean, it happens in many cultures and communities, but I don't want to but men, I think heterosexual men in particular have more shame.
I think
coming
you're right.
forward. I think it's harder. Like they're supposed to man up and they're supposed to be able to handle this.
Right. How do you? I read that book. I read it twice, and then I sent it on to an associate of mine who's in a pastoral role with the hope that he would share it. But they didn't have any answers. The book was very thorough in the level of abuse, the mental, the verbal, and the conclusion was stay with her, show more compassion. And I was struggling with that.
Yeah, no,
because I don't believe people should stay with people that hurt them.
Agreed.
I can't. I mean, I got what he was saying about, the family, but I said, but she has hurt this man.
Right.
Why is he staying, particularly if he is the bread earner and has provided her with a very good quality of life, but she is angry about God knows what,
Right.
refuses help, and you're supposed to stay?
Right. No, and no one should stay, men or women, right? And we serve men, so if someone called our hotline, we would talk to them and we would connect them. So if they needed a protection order, we would go. If they needed court accompaniment, we would do that. I mean, it really doesn't matter on your gender. We just focus on survivors, right?
Okay.
We don't work with
Period.
batters, we just work with survivors.
That was illuminating. I said we're now at a point in history where men, even if the numbers are small, but I would really be interested in looking at the pathology of that kind of abuse, where, and they had all kinds of men providing testimonies, and it was a painful read.
Oh, I bet.
It was, because I kept saying to myself, why are you there? Why would you tolerate this? And then I thought about what they were sharing as opposed to a female, which is she's getting abused and poorly treated, and her reasons were very different from his reasons. I think the shame factor with men is a big one.
Sure.
Which is, I just have to weather this through.
Right, because do I call the police and the police are they going to laugh at me? Are they going to take me seriously?
I can understand, but there are some, one man said his wife had long nails and she clawed him. And I was reading that and I said to myself, well, she wouldn't have long nails anymore. But my point is that it's a very complex thing, and I really do believe it has a lot to do with our culture. I mean, when you think about the fact that 14-year-old girls can still be married off in certain parts of our country. Period. A 14-year-old girl married off to a grown man.
Right.
And he doesn't go to the penitentiary for pedophilia? What? And And it's that type of thing that can cause me great concern. I know I'm very fortunate because I don't have any of that kind of behavior with my children. I'm grateful on both sides. But I would like, as you look out on this whole arena, and I'm not trying to write you off as unemployed, but I would like this agency to not have a purpose.
Me too.
Meaning, we don't have any clients.
Right.
This thing, so what is your vision for this whole issue?
Well, that's a big question.
I know, but I like to ask big questions.
I think my vision is holding batters accountable and focus on the batters. We as a society look at victims and victim blame over and over and over again. So how do we get batters connected to good programming to help them recognize their behaviors and really work on changing their behaviors, and increasing safety for survivors and looking at different things. Now I'm going to say there's not enough housing in our community, right? And so how do we help get survivors out of their abusive homes into safe, affordable housing? So that's what I really would like us to focus on too. Again, I hate that it has to be the female who escapes, but I don't think...
It is what it is.
It is.
It is.
And again, it really is continuing the conversation. And I said this earlier, I'm going to say it again, that I think people are like, oh, this is behind closed doors issue. This is a husband and wife issue or a partner issue. And it's not. Statistics tell us that women who are murdered, there's a high percentage of bystanders that are killed. So if my batter's going to kill me at my job, he's not going to just shoot me.
He's going to kill your associates.
He's going to kill my associates.
Oh, okay. That changes the trajectory a little bit.
It does. I mean, like if the batter, like I know of a story where a gal, her abuser came over to kill her, and she had a friend over, killed the friend, killed her. It is not just a couples issue; that it really is a community issue.
I believe that.
And one last one. This happened several years ago here in Dayton, where a client agreed, I shouldn't say client. She wasn't a client. A survivor agreed to meet with her ex-partner in a parking lot in an open space.
Okay.
And he killed her. She didn't know he had a gun. And it happened out in public at a store's parking lot. And a father and daughter were just driving down the street, and this 12-year-old girl witnessed this violence. And I say that again just to reiterate that it really is a community issue, that we all have to be invested. We all have to speak up, that we all really need to know that it's not shameful and it's not embarrassing, and that there really is help out there.
Well, it's interesting because I listened to the news last night. You may have, that was in Cincinnati, where a gentleman had been arrested for abusing his cat. Oh. And he slung the cat against the door, and they ultimately, a neighbor called and said, my neighbor is beating the heck out of his kitty. And the cat didn't make it, by the way. And he's getting ready to be, he got arrested.
Yes.
And I was like, if they can advocate for a kitty, surely sanity has to prevail here. And can't we have people, watchful neighbors, to be aware?
And I think that's really interesting. I know that's not where you're going, but we know when we talk about how lethal situations are, pet abuse is right up there, because the batter's saying, look what I can do to this innocent cat. And I can do it to you.
Oh, my words.
Yes. That's a huge
I had
correlation.
Never, ever looked at a correlation between the abuse of the animal and the abuse of the spouse. Mm-hmm. Oh, my God. I guess I see your vision, and I do believe that the only alternative to this is got to be, and it's got to be deeper than just a smack on the hand.
Right.
I do believe that we're talking about serious therapy, trauma identification. When did this happen for this guy?
Right.
What happened? what made him this way. And that's a whole nother area, because we are dealing with prevention, and I'm looking at where did it start? Who was it in the womb?
Right.
Your mother didn't want you. The chemicals she released said, I don't want you. What happened to cause this person to be so disturbed and to act it out in such a totally horrible way? And so I don't have any answers, but I do know that with the rise of technology, with the increase of more transient population, we're going to continue to have to face this. I urge all females, you better know who you're dealing with, particularly you young ones. You better know what you're looking at, and you better be aware that they can make a real bad dent in your life. On our next show, I'm going to be interviewing a woman named April Ballantyne, and I'm going to show the video. April Ballantyne did an online dating app, and she decided a couple of months into it, this isn't working. And she ended it, not in a negative way, but just, we can't do this. And this man found her as she was going into her home, and he shot her point blank 5 times. And she fell on the ground, and the neighbors called the police, but this woman is paralyzed from her waist down. And she's in therapy to try to walk there. With technology, she will have an exoskeleton or something that will help her to walk. But I talked to her, and I just started crying in the middle of our conversation, because this guy petitioned the court to get out of the penitentiary so that he could live his life.
Sure.
He said, I've suffered enough.
Right.
And the judge was a female, and she was like, well, you know what? You just moved me to give you 10 more years. So added on to his 40 was another 10. And I just said to myself, you may be alive, who knows? But my point is that this stuff is real. And I'm going to have her on, and I'm going to air her story. She's one of many women I've talked to, by the way, who had their lives altered because they did not do their due diligence. So my admonition to all females that are watching this show who are single is to treat him the same way as you would treat a person trying to get a bank loan, I guess. When I dealt with bank loans, I looked at everything. Why? Because I want to make sure that you didn't mess me up, mess the institution up. Surely we're more valuable than those institutions. Surely we're worth more. Okay? Surely we can do better as women. And we must do better. For our girls and our boys, we have to do better. But I want to thank you for your giving me time to hear your agency and your information, and hopefully our viewers will learn something positive that can direct their lives. Can you give us your helpline number before we sign off?
Sure. It is 937-461-HELP, 937-461-4357.
You all got it. This is part 2 of a 5-part series on domestic violence. Today was the culture of domestic violence. I'm your host, Michelle Graves, affectionately known for 40 years now as the Money Lady. And in closing, I too am a domestic violence survivor. And I thank God every day for the gift of life and for not having destroyed my hope. You can make it. As Sly Stone said, you can make it if you try. And you're going to have to try. Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here. You're
you.
such a blessing to the community. You have to know that.
Thank you.
I love you so much.
Thank you.
And I will talk with you all another time. Take care of yourselves and have a great day. Bye-bye.